typically support the conservation districts with training, mostly erosion control, that sort of thing. They get a new technician, provide training. I also go out and look at stormwater plans, usually almost exclusively for general permits. The region usually handles all the individual permits. So I may get involved in some stormwater from time to time. And my areas include pretty much the eastern part of the state. There's two counterparts. One is located in the center part, two office, and the other one's in Pittsburgh. So we kind of broken up the state. Anyway, my topic today is a pretty short one. It's on PCSM maintenance requirements. Maintenance is a requirement, a 102 requirement. I'm not sure if there's any old regulations, but the new regulations, I guess they're not really that new anymore. It's not November 2010. But it does, I put a little excerpt in there, 102.8. Talks about having a long-term maintenance schedule that provides for repair, replacement, and routine maintenance of all PCSM BMP. So it is a requirement. It's actually a checklist item that the district uses to look at plans to see if they're complete. So this isn't on there. Basically wanted to get to a technical review. It'll get sent back with a comment that would be a completeness comment. Okay, so it is a requirement. Most of what you're going to see is directly out of the DEP's PCSM BMP manual. So if you haven't seen it, if you have never read it or haven't read it in some time, I think it might be a good refresher. We really don't have a lot of topics on, or a lot of presentations on this subject. Usually when I'm asked to do one of these things, I'll go to my counterparts or other people in DEP as far as, hey, do you have any information on this? And then I actually will reach out to conservation districts as well, and didn't get anything, nothing. So really haven't looked into a lot of it. There hasn't been a lot on this, so pretty much what we have now is what's in our manual. Okay, so I'm going to run down the typical BMPs real quick and just kind of hit the high points as far as the maintenance. And these are right out of the PCSM BMP manual. And as a minimum, they should be, if you are proposing, if the design engineer is proposing one of these BMPs, they should, as a minimum, be on the plans under the maintenance and repair section. Pervious pavement with infiltration bed. I think most people know what this is. Basically, it's the asphalt is not your typical asphalt. It has less fines and more voids in it that allows water to infiltrate through the surface of it, as opposed to typical asphalt, which is much denser, more fines, and to the extent where it's basically impervious. A couple of notes for maintenance. You want to vacuum it as a minimum. Again, and I should say, these are general requirements, okay? I think each circumstance could be a little bit different. You want to kind of evaluate all these BMPs based on what's draining to them. What kind of, for this BMP, what kind of traffic do you expect? Is it a construction yard? Is it a construction company? We're going to have a lot of vehicles with a lot of mud coming into them. Things like that, or to the doctor's office. So these are, just keep in mind, these are all general requirements, or general considerations, we'll say. So you want to vacuum probably about 2 to 3 times a year. You don't want to deposit any soil, mulch. I know when the landscapers come in the springtime, they want to bring a lot of mulch in there. You don't want to dump it in the parking lot. Okay, that's definitely a no-no. And cleaning inlets that drain to it. You're going to see this. This is going to come up. This is going to come up quite a bit, and it's pretty standard for most BMPs. The inlets that are tributary to this BMP. You want to make sure, for one, they should have a sump in them. Okay. to collect any, any debris, larger debris, solids, things like that, have them sink out. And you want to clean them, again, as a minimum twice per year. This may not be enough for certain inlets, or it may be too much for certain situations. Winter maintenance. You don't want to spread any sand or cinders on the surface. Obviously, it's going to clog, right? You can. Snow plowing is fine. However, they recommend that the plower, the snow plow, the plow itself is elevated 1 inch, okay? And salt is acceptable for the surface. As far as repairs go, basically what they say in here is if it's less than 50 square feet, you can just repair it with anything, either regular asphalt or pervious asphalt. 50 square feet, 7 point something by 7 point something, not a big area, right? So it's probably not going to matter what you patch it with. Once you get over 50 square feet, they recommend consulting the owner, you really need a design engineer, okay, as far as replacing that area. And one thing you never want to do is you don't want seal covered, obviously. That would be a no-no, right? Infiltration basin, we see these quite a bit. Basically, they are designed to kind of hold water in them. In this case here, we have a little, there's an overflow. A lot of times these are also used as detention basins. So the bottom is really an infiltration volume, and then once it gets to the first orifice, it kind of becomes a detention basin. So a lot of these structures are not just one BMP; they're actually being used as other BMPs as well. Infiltration, detention, that's kind of typical. Okay, but it's basically designed to infiltrate a volume of water. Okay. As far as maintenance, again, catch basins leading to these areas. You want to keep the water as clean as possible that's going into these basins. Vegetation should be maintained. Vegetation is typically good for infiltration. The root system helps maintain a good infiltration. And certainly, it might be common sense, but you don't have vehicles driving or parking, or even mowing. You have to actually be careful of certain mowers can actually compact it during time. That seems to be the biggest problem with infiltration basin is the compaction. We get this scientific data. Geotech comes out there, you dig a bore pit, looks at the soils, does an infiltration test, and puts together a report. And it's everything looks fine for infiltration. You go out there, it's it's not infiltrating. It's more of a wet pond than anything. And my guess is probably it's a construction. It's probably a construction issue. Okay, compaction of the subsoil. Okay, these areas really should almost be built like they would build an infiltration or a sand mound system. Work from the sides and literally, be very, very careful of that surface, because once you start compacting it, then you kind of change the properties of that soil, and all that study that was done prior to construction, the geotech report really is kind of goes out the window when that happens. As far as inspection, inspect basin after runoff events, and you want to make sure it drains down. Typically, they're supposed to drain in 3 days. Okay, 72 hours actually. We don't want to create mosquito traps if we don't have to. Typically, mosquitoes can breed as little as 5 days. Okay, so you don't want to have standing water there. Hopefully it'll drain in 3 days. Certainly, you don't want to go over that 5 or 6 days. You want to inspect for sediment, any damage to the outlet structure. That's pretty critical. Okay, if there's any damage to that, you certainly want to fix that immediately. If there's any spills, any signs of contamination, you want to also inspect the berms and mowing as well. Mowing probably not you definitely want to mow the sides, okay? You want to make it, if you're going to inspect this, you can't inspect what you don't see, okay? So you don't want to have vegetation that's 2 feet high in there, okay? So as a minimum, you really want to keep that area maybe mowed a little closer on the banks, on the berm, and possibly around the outlet structure. You don't want real high, thick vegetation around that, so you really can't see as far as inspection goes. There's a picture of a infiltration berm. It's about 2 years old, I believe, this one here, and it's pretty well maintained. This I drive by frequently, so it captures water pretty well, and it drains within about a day. So that works very well. This one not so much. Okay, this one's real close to my house. It's about 3 years old. It was designed and built as an infiltration basin. Okay, and let's see. This is the back end of it. I don't know if I have a pointer, but the far end is where the outlet structure is, and this is where the inlet is. This is the opposite side of the outlet structure, and the whole thing was actually designed as one elevation. The bottom is one elevation, all the way back to to the far end of this picture, and you can see where the water is. It's a lot of sediment has accumulated in there, and where it comes in there, that's the major inflow in there. And it never was. A lot of things went wrong in this, probably as far as construction goes, and it really never got cleaned out after construction. It was kind of like the sediment was left in there. And so as far as being a infiltration basin, it's ready for a fish stocking right now, because literally there's small fish in there and things like that. It's a church, and I think somebody's been putting some in there. But this was always cited as an outstanding issue in there. So currently, the permit has expired, I believe. It was a 2-year permit, but the notice of termination, the contractor and the owner are still listed as the responsible parties for that. So if in any event there is a problem downstream, they're still, we like to say, on the hook for these types of things. So subsurface infiltration beds. Basically, at least my opinion, subsurface, you probably want to keep the cleanest, you certainly want to keep the cleanest water, you want to be putting to these areas. Because these areas, they're very difficult. You can inspect the water level, and that's probably about it. I mean, you can look down at an inlet, I think somebody mentioned that earlier, or some kind of a port, and see where the water elevation is. You can measure that, you can physically measure that. Things like that. But you really want to prevent and keep that water as clean as possible that's going into that, okay? Because as far as maintaining them, I'm not sure of any way there really is to maintain that. If they do get clogged, I think maintenance is almost like a replacement. I don't know if there is any method to really maintain, repairing them once they're clogged, other than replacing. Again, catch basins, keeping the water as clean as possible going into these things, as a minimum twice per year. You want to keep the vegetation as well on top of these in good condition. Okay. And again, vehicles, you don't want any vehicles parking, driving over them. Always bad for infiltration. Infiltration trench, pretty much similar, same things. These are basically smaller, the beds are basically a series of infiltration trenches. So this is kind of the smaller version, generally one pipe to handle a smaller area. Okay, and basically the same maintenance issues. You want to inspect the catch basins. Again, these catch basins should have, as a minimum, a sump in them, if not some other filtering device, which we'll see a little bit in a few minutes here. Rain gardens and bioretention. Basically, these are designed usually as a volume and a water quality BMP. Okay, they're designed to infiltrate and clean the water with vegetation, filtration, that sort of thing. Here's another picture of one without a spillway on it. And this is what one looks like out in the field. It's basically built, very small one. It's built around a type inlet, okay? And the inlet's elevated about 6 inches, okay? So, designed to hold that volume of water below the top of that inlet and infiltrate it within a few days, okay? Some of the maintenance issues with rain gardens. Basically, your typical pruning and weeding, debris removal. You want to do that at least twice a year. There's one set every 2 to 3 years. The entire area may require mulching, okay, because that's going to decompose a little bit. Should be inspected as a minimum twice per year. Dry well and sea beach pits. Again, this is more of those kind of underground type of BMP, so you really want to keep this water clean. Typically, you see the water that's tributary to these coming off of a roof area. Okay, that's probably the cleanest water of the site, right? You pretty much just have your debris from trees and things like that. So it's pretty clean water. Basically, a pit. Can't really see that. It almost looks like the bottom is concrete there. That's a little odd. It shouldn't be. It should be open so it can infiltrate. Unless that entire thing is just soil, it's really kind of hard to tell. But basically, it's a pit filled with stone. Okay. You want your cleanest water from the site to go in there and then basically infiltrate. And at the top there is an overflow. Okay, so it does get filled up. It goes onto the surface. Okay, this is an ideal BMP that's used quite a bit in housing developments. Volume is always a difficult issue to meet on permit applications. So you kind of do what you can, and this is a nice BMP for houses. Okay, design engineers like to use this one. Basically you have one in the front, one in the back of the house. It generally could satisfy the volume that's created by the increase in the roof area as a minimum. So it is used quite a bit. This is a little different version of one. When I look at this, it sort of reminds me of a septic system. The first tank there will kind of be your septic system, and then the last tank in the train would be like a leach field. But the first tank is nice because you can have your solids drop out of there, any debris from the roof, things like that. You're not going to have a lot of debris, but I go up and clean my gutters out about 3 or 4 times a year. It takes me about an hour each time. It's a real pain. Did find it works better with a blower now. Just going up on a roof, it takes about 15 minutes, but a lot of debris gets in there. Okay. And you don't want to have it getting into these underground storage pits. Because once they get in there, they're pretty tough to get out. Some maintenance issues. You want to inspect it about 4 times a year. This is probably the biggest thing. Regularly clean out the gutters. Okay, it's sort of like the inlets. Okay, to the other BMPs. You want to try to keep the water that's going in them as clean as possible, and replace the filter screen on the roof area. And if you do have a sump box, that should be cleaned out again at least once per year. Constructive Wetlands. This is a BMP, generally a water quality BMP. That's pretty much, doesn't do very much for rate control. So it's typically a water quality. It says during the first growing season it should be inspected about 2 to 3 weeks. I doubt if that ever happens. And it's kind of an aggressive schedule. However, these are general guidelines, general recommendations. During the first 2 years, they should be inspected at least 4 times per year. And after any major storm events, which in the manual describes it as 2 inches in 24 hours. And basically, once it's established, the vegetation is established, there's probably not a whole lot of maintenance, okay? If there's any sediment in the forebay, you want to make sure that that's cleaned out. They're recommended every 3 to 7 years. A wet pond / retention basin. This is typically a water quality BMP as well. Sometimes they're used as both a wet pond at the bottom, and once they get to a certain elevation, it kind of function as a detention basin for rate control. Okay, similar to the constructive wetlands. You want to inspect it the first growing season every 2 to 3 weeks. You want to look at the vegetation, bank stability, and certainly the inlet and outlet conditions, the outlet structure, okay, and any debris, the forebays. And similar to constructive wetlands, once they are established, the vegetation is established, it should require a little maintenance. Dry extended detention basins, we see these everywhere, right? They've been popular since probably the 70s. Okay, they're primarily, and basically they are for the larger floods, larger storms, 2 years, 100-year storms, things like that. You can walk around most buildings that were built in the last 40 years and find one of these around. Typical illustration of one, you have a forebay coming in, which your major flow goes into a forebay to help kind of clean it up a little bit, and kind of goes through some vegetation and eventually to an outlet structure. Okay. As far as maintenance issues, they recommend 4 times a year, and now they in the manual says it's every storm after 1 inch. That's pretty aggressive. I don't know if that's ever happened. I'm sure there are detention basins that are probably forgotten about by now, or may not even be seen because of the vegetation. Okay. Yeah, you definitely want to do the mowing and trimming, again, especially on the banks and around the outlet structure. Okay, because remember, you can't. These are supposed to be inspected. Okay, and that's what the districts are going to look for, is a schedule in the PCSM plan, and you can't inspect obviously what you can't see. Water quality filters and hydrodynamic devices. There's a kind of a wide range. Okay, some are typically they can range from typically like a basket, more or less, with small holes that kind of capture sediment in them, to more sophisticated, much more expensive devices. In this case here, looks like nothing more than a basket. Okay, just to handle any kind of debris in there, solids, things like that. Another one, kind of a smaller version, looks like it's in the yard, small yard inlet. Basket. Basically, you want to follow the manufacturer's recommendations in there. And generally, these have a lot of these will have sumps in them, and excuse me, manual recommends when the sumps get up to half full, they should be cleaned out. Okay, and what get that debris in the sump area, and it resuspends it and then it goes back out. So you definitely want to clean it out. You don't want to wait till it gets over half full. Snouts. These are probably one of the most spec'd out BMP that I've seen anyway in the state. It's pretty popular. It's doesn't require testing, things like that. This is a water quality BMP. For the most part, it takes the debris out trash, things like that. There are these curtains that you can put on these, either bioskirts, I think they're called. I think there's a slide here, and they can also help remove some of the oils and things like that. Okay, so they're pretty popular. There's one with the bioskirt to help remove some of the oils and things like that. Snout maintenance. Basically with these, you kind of have to monitor your site, and that's really up to the owner. I mean, you're going to have their general recommendations from the manufacturer on your plan, but after a while, after about 2 to 3 years, the owner should be kind of monitoring this, and those can be adjusted. Okay, if this BMP is above, say, like some kind of like perpetually disturbed area, it's going to require obviously a lot more maintenance than if it is below a forest, something that doesn't have a lot of water quality issues, things like that. So it really it takes about, from what I understand, about 2 to 3 years to get a good hold on the maintenance schedule. But as a minimum, you're going to have something on a plan, so you can probably follow the standard maintenance recommendations from the manufacturer. Basically, those bioskirts, they recommend replacing annually on here. Hydrodynamic separators, also people call them just TerraClean. These are become quite expensive. They could be quite expensive, okay, depending on the size, the flow with them. This is a picture here of one getting cleaned out. You pretty much have to vacuum that out. This was actually done at the Berks County Conservation District. They have a lot of BMPs in the building area. Okay, and this is one of them, and that's what it looks like when the truck comes in, and that's what it looks like close up. It's kind of like a sludge. Now I talked to the district there, and they actually have to sign a contract with this Terry Hill. They actually will come out and do the maintenance, okay? And they'll adjust it accordingly. And he says after about 1.5 years, you get this thick sludge in there. So they're recommending once a year that the truck comes in there and cleans things out. There's also some booms and things like that are installed in here that doesn't show up on this close-up, but that helps to remove some of the oil. So basically once a year for this. This is a typical parking lot, okay? So. Any questions? Again, most of these things were taken right out of our stormwater BMP manual. Yes?
I have a question about this protocol for sediment disposal, and if there's any solutions other than putting it in a landfill.
Good question. It probably depends on what's in it. I think the one slide in here says it should be disposed of. I'm not sure exactly how it was worded, but it really depends on what's in there. Probably landfill. That would be my guess. Okay, because there's probably some oils. And there could be a lot of things in there. Okay, so you want to dispose that in an environmentally safe way. Yeah, that's a topic. I've actually heard some information on there. I think it was at the Villanova. They have a BMPs throughout the area, and that's one of the questions came up is now we have all these polluted areas throughout the university. These are capturing all kinds of bad stuff, and they're right there. What do you do? I don't think anybody's really looked into that too much. They haven't been cleaned out, as far as I know, to any degree. But I'd recommend, I think for now, I think it would go to some kind of landfill. So, any other questions? All right, thank you.